We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
How do we honor the truth of the past while shaping a vision for our future? How do I navigate the complexities of my relationships, masculinity, manhood, and personal transformation without losing myself in the process? Today, I'm thrilled to introduce someone who embodies the intersection of strength, vulnerability, and spiritual insight, Reverend Dale Benson. Reverend Dale's not just an ordained minister, but he's a deep thinker, a martial artist, a spiritual coach, and a devoted dad. His life story is a tapestry woven with threads of resilience, loss, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. Freedom in relationships and identity, and the ways we show up for ourselves and others. We dive into the liberating possibilities of redefining masculinity, embracing vulnerability, and cultivating relationships rooted in freedom and authenticity. We'll explore what it means to truly face life's challenges, not by clinging to stability, but by moving fluidly with life, the flow. So get ready for a conversation that challenges convention, sparks reflection, and I hope will inspire your growth. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey, everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast where we are setting out to prove week on week that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. This week, I get to hang with somebody who I met like a decade ago doing gender equity and reconciliation work with a really good organization out there called Jerry, Gender Equity and Reconciliation International. And Dale Benson, say hi, Dale, Reverend Dale.
Hey, everyone. I am so excited and grateful to be here. I can't wait to have the conversation that we're going to have.
So what happened for me was Dale and I met at this workshop that I had never participated in. This was a new thing. It was about bringing men and women together in a ritual honoring space to listen deeply to one another and share deeply with one another. But you know what really got me about Reverend Dale is sitting around the lunch tables. When we sat together to eat, Reverend, this man, I was like, holy shit, this is a deep dude. This is somebody that I would love to just hear from and sit and listen to. So we became acquainted at that time. We've been kind of Facebook friends. And I'm going to read some stuff off of his Facebook page as we go along here, just to give you some hints about who he is. But let me give you a little bit more formal introduction. So Reverend Dale is an ordained minister within the Baptist United Church of Christ denominations. And as a contemplative thinker, writer, and a 2-time black belt martial artist, fitness coach, and spiritual life coach, he supports men in embracing their truths. His passions include reading, writing, fitness, and mindfulness. Reverend Dale is a devoted partner, lover, friend, and father to his exceptional 10-year-old son. That's something I get to see, is his love for his son. We're going to be talking about relationships today quite a bit. We're going to be talking about masculinity. We're going to be talking about connection. We're going to be talking about freedom and responsibility. And I have kind of framed this whole thing in my head as it's kind of a liberation theology around who we are as human beings relating to one another. This is a spiritual dude. This is a spiritual teacher in the room. So first question, Dale, tell us, share with the folks out there in the podcast just a little bit about, like, how did you get to be where you are? You've taken some crazy paths to become this man. So talk a little bit about you, background.
Yeah. Oh, man, I love that question. Well, I feel like I I have to start with my childhood. I was raised primarily by what I often reference as a circle of women, circle of Black women. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina. And one of the things that I have often constantly reflected on was every single one of those women that helped raise me were deeply harmed by the men that they loved. And so constantly part of as I got older, I carried a whole bunch of rage and anger, frustration towards my own biological father and just the experiences that I had been through. But the initial thing that often comes up for me is like my love for my grandmother and my mom. So how initially the question was, how do I honor these beautiful women that raised me? And so that was part of how I framed myself as I got older. As I got older, I realized that's also can be problematic if you're not really careful about, um, how you sacrifice yourself for others. If you're not honoring what's actually going on internally for you to support
Yes.
those around you. And then as I got old, as a teenager, I got really, really close to my grandfather. We called him a mechanic philosopher. He always had a book in his hand
Yeah.
and something tinkering with some car. And so he was also a minister at the local church that I grew up in. He introduced me to Black liberation theology, a scholar by the name of James H. Cone. And it really, initially it bugged me because he would make me read if I got in trouble at school, which was often when I was a teenager. So I was always reading stuff at his house and he would like test me on the book. And if he could tell I didn't really read it, he would make me read it again. And he will sometimes even say that he thought I might be a minister as I got older, which was blasphemous when I was a teenager. But I went to the military after high school and I had a whole bunch of time to read because I was sitting in the middle of the ocean. I was in the Navy, and painfully, my grandfather died by suicide my last year in the Navy, and it hit me right in the chest. And that's when I kind of began therapy. I also I promised him before I went to the Navy that I would go to college. So after I got out of the Navy, I went to college and went to a small school called Greensboro College in North Carolina. I was basically taken under the wing by a scholar there named Dr. Rhonda Burnett Bletch. She was a Old Testament scholar, and she reintroduced me to the the ve it reintroduced me to various thinkers in the field, and I was reintroduced to James Cone again at that time, and I lived in the library, and it really, um, took my life in another direction. I really started reflecting on what kind of man I wanted to be. I was reflecting on my grandfather's death, and yeah, from there, I went to seminary, became ordained, also worked as a police officer for a little while during that time, 2 master's degrees, and also then worked as a hospital chaplain for nearly 8 years. And that work has been like the crux of my internal reflection, contemplative life. Dealing with death on a daily basis,
Yeah.
like, requires that you reflect on what's going on internally for you. So, yeah, and I think a huge part of what I took up was my own personal growth, and then I found it necessary for my own growth to reach out to other men to create space for us to tell the truth, the deepest truths about what's going on in our lives.
I want to stick with the chaplaincy at the hospital. So share some of what being so intimately connected with death and so intimately connected with that transitional kind of time frame. What are some of the things that you took away from that?
Oh wow! I think the main one that I often and thank you for that question. I as I shared earlier that I adore reading. And one of the phrases that I always thought about as I was working as a chaplain is God has changed by it's a writer named Octavia Butler, Parable of
Oh,
the Talent.
yes.
Um,
Yes.
she puts out this idea of God has changed. And so as I'm walking with patients and their families, one of the hardest things for us to deal with as humans is the fact that like we're constantly changing, that we are constantly changing, everything around us is constantly changes, and yet we get so high strung on like clinging on to something and thinking it's like the ultimate truth. And life is constantly telling us that no, you can't really grab life like that. It's constantly shifting and changing, and we have to be as flexible and adaptable and willing to stay still and feel what's going on internally for us. One of my struggles has constantly been like, especially when these catastrophic things happen. It feels like my life is completely falling apart. And what I've had to learn to do is to breathe, be present with it as much as I possibly can. And also, which feels most important to me, is to learn from it. Like, life is constantly teaching us things, even if it's painful and we don't like to admit it, it's still like poking at us, like, there's a gift here. And so that's actually what I took mostly from my chaplaincy work. How do I, the best of my ability, create space for this patient that may be dying to embrace the fact that that's what's happening. And this is even happen with ministers that come because what they often do is pray that they heal and stand up and leave the hospital when I know the information that this person is transitioning. And so how do I support this person? Like this is going to happen, and also support family and loved ones. Well, first of all, where they are located at the moment, and also
Yeah.
kind of hold space for them to embrace what's happening in their lives.
Thank you. And I also know that you put on a different kind of robe for a period of time in and speaking about the kind of contemplative practice and sitting down and slowing down and getting still, I wonder, talk a little bit about that side quest that you went on into Buddhist
Yes,
monkhood.
yes. I mean, I think it was so necessary for my journey. And I often identify myself as a Buddhist Christian because my internal work feels deeply connected to my Buddhist practice. My my activism, my way of relating to other human beings comes directly out of how I read Jesus. And so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it feels connected in a lot of ways. I moved into Buddhism because when I read the Gospels, what I experience Jesus often doing is creating space for himself to reflect, connect to higher power or his internal power, to be able to face the ravages of what was going on in the text in his lifetime. So Buddhism felt like a way for me to. It nudged me to constantly be here in my body, in my flesh, and paying attention to what's going on internally in my mind, in my heart, and not to get rid of it. Because what I often experience in churches is this idea that we could rid ourselves of something. And one of the things that I often tell people is, I mean, I smile and I come off as very kind and loving, and I am. And there's another side of me that I also think I was working out in the military when I worked in like these kind of different kind of jobs. Buddhism required that I stay with my anger, pay attention to it, don't push it away, and have the capacity to use it to the best of my ability. So I often remind people that I'm actually choosing to be present with you. So if I also have another side I can show if you want to meet that side. And that's the way that I often try to show up in the world is that I'm choosing to be here with you and love you. And I also have another side that I can use if necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something about this connects into masculinity. So it seems
Mhm.
like we're kind of talking about manhood now,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So, I'm going to read something. I'll find something to read off of your page, but going along with what you were just saying, how does that idea of I'm choosing to be here with you right now, I'm choosing to be in my loving space, and
Mm.
I know that there's another side to
Yes.
me, how does that relate to your work with men and
Oh,
as a spiritual coach?
I love that question so much. Boysen. Yeah. So a lot of the things that, especially socially on social media. in the ways that I experience people talking about manhood and masculinity is there's something that men need to get rid of. And, there's a lot of statistics about how violent we can be. And I'm not interested in like getting away from that truth,
Yeah.
but I'm also not interested in teaching men to rid themselves of what we have developed to help us survive. But my practice is to get them to acknowledge it, that you have rage, that you have anger, that you have pain, that you have whatever feelings is going on internally for you. And so, how can you breathe enough? How can you create enough calmness in your body so that when it arises, you get to choose how to use that energy? Because that energy is necessary for us. And and that's the reason why I picked up martial arts as one of my practices. Because there's moments, I have a 10-year-old son. There's moments when he gets on my damn nerves, and that's just honest. And so how do I it's not because he's doing something wrong. It's not that there's something that needs to change about him. It's that I just simply have an energy that's coming up. And so how do I create I often speak about it as like I love Batman. So I have like this bat belt. And part of what I do is I go for walks. I go train in martial arts. I love lifting weights. And so how do I create enough space in my life to go do those things and then show up my son in the best, most loving, open way as possible? And so, yeah, martial arts and like my contemplative practice feels necessary for that.
You said on Facebook, I'm not against traditional manhood or masculinity. I'm against how we lie to ourselves and others to perform traditional manhood or masculinity. Don't strive to perform something that shouldn't be a goal. Be
Yes.
yourself, family. Be yourself in all your glory and insanity. Tell
Yeah.
yourself the truth.
Yes. Mhm. So,
How do
uh,
men lie to themselves? How do you find men lying to themselves about who they are?
yeah, I mean, and it's almost like a form of bypass, like internal bypassing. And that's the way that I often experience it with my clients and even myself. I have to be very careful. I'm in a relationship with someone and I see that they're angry. And so instead of being truthful, I lie so things can stay peaceful. And I think there's ways of relating with each other. Well, honesty can cultivate peace. I think it requires a lot of breathing. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of intentional kindness. But I experience a lot of men, often men lie to themselves to keep the peace, to be accepted socially, to kind of, and I experienced this with me. Like I don't want people to see me as a threat. And part of what I've had to accept is, and I'm going to say it this way, like yeah, I'm a kind of stocky black dude, and so there's a lot of biases in society that
Yes.
just exist, and that's none of my business until they make it my business. And so what I've had to learn to do is to breathe, to calm down, be honest with myself first, so that I can extend that honesty to someone else. And whatever they do with it, I can't. There's nothing that I can do about that. I can do something about how I present the information, how what kind of energy I exert. I can do stuff about that. But however they experience my truth, I can't. I can't do anything about it, and that's hard. I mean, that's definitely been hard for me to
Mhm.
to accept that sometimes people just can't hold whatever I am. And that's really painful when it's someone that you love deeply or care about. And still, I have to maintain my integrity. That feels necessary. And so I often nudge my clients, dude, first of all, especially if we're in a space together, I want you to be honest with yourself. So when you step back in the world with your children, your 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 wife, your lover, your coworkers, that you can be as honest as possible. I think for your own sake.
It seems to me that so much of the violence, and I appreciate how you spoke to it, what you witnessed growing up, and I witnessed some witnessed some similar stuff too. The women
Mm,
in my life who I loved getting hurt,
mm. Yeah, yeah,
right? And it
right.
seems to me that so much of that violence is because those men are actually unwilling to face the truth
Mhm.
about who they are and how afraid they are and what they're
Yeah.
experiencing and the sense of powerlessness or the
Mhm.
inability to control others.
Yes,
When you and
yes.
I spoke, you said some things about freedom in our
Mhm,
relationships. So now we're kind of moving into how we relate to the people that we love.
mhm,
And you talked about self-responsibility and freedom
mm.
kind of in opposition to control, right? Like
Yes.
so many times I see men get into relationships and I want me, I'll own it, right? I want to
Mm,
control my wife. I want to control
mhm,
my kids. I want to control
mhm.
what's going on in my situation. And I get very frustrated and pent up when I
Yeah,
can't do that. And
right.
I've witnessed you framing that in a different way. Talk more about that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like at the core of it, at least for me, has always been, particularly as an African American man living, or now living out of the United States, but before growing up, being born and raised in the United States, freedom is like a core value for me. Like
Mm,
at this, like almost in my bones, and like reading about the ways in which my ancestors had to struggle and to survive and to pursue freedom in whatever ways they could and did. The way that I'm kind of like looking at that is for me, freedom socially and politically can exist if it doesn't exist like in my most intimate relationships.
wow. Yeah.
It cannot exist. So we can, you know, argue and fuss about like, who gets elected and stuff like that, which I do think is important. But at the end of the day, if it's not on the ground, then I know that it can't be a kind of a more bigger reality. So the way that I think about relationships is that I'm a free human being. This person that I'm in relationship with is also free. So now what we have to do is like that. Now's the work of like seeing this person as they are, not through my own biases and projections, as they are on their own terms, and then choosing the way that I want to relate to them, not trying to manipulate them and change them in the ways that feels good to me. Um, and I think most people that are in any kind of relationship will say that I'm stubborn as all get out. I I believe in change deeply, and I'm
Mm,
also going to be honest as possible about who I am. And so now I'm showing you who I am. You're showing me who you are, and now let's choose how we're going to relate together. And the thing that's often painful for most people is like the outcome of that can mean I'm getting the hell out of here. So that just has to be present. We just have to deal with our feelings around that. But and the more and more I'm able to like practice that, it's so beautiful when, particularly when my crazy comes out and
yes.
someone else says, Dale, I see you and I'm still choosing to be here with you. I mean, now that's love to me. And to me, love can't be this thing of you're making me comfortable. My nervous system is relaxed all the time when I'm with you. So that means I love you. I don't actually see that as love. I see that as something else. And I don't necessarily have the word for it. I mean, in some ways, it's some control stuff going on in that. That's what I'm often speaking to. But I am quite sure that love is seeing someone as they are in their truth, and then choosing how to relate. Because to me, freedom and love have to go together. If they're not together, and I hope it's okay for me to use this language, then fuck it.
Yeah.
Like I don't want it.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely okay to use that language. It seems to me too that, you kind of brought it into the frame before, but like, seems to me that that's about as Christ consciousness as you can get.
Mm, mhm, mm, mm.
Like, that's it, with all the trappings and decorations and political power and control
Yes.
removed, like,
Yes.
it was the affirmation of our individual freedom and choosing to be with one another in love
Y- Yes.
regardless.
Yes. Yes. Man, I deeply believe that. And that's what's been some of my, and I don't want to go into this too deeply, some of my own pain is, as an ordained minister, some of my own pain has been consistently seeing a church that has very little connection to that reality, that Jesus was practicing something that wasn't about judgment, that wasn't about control, that wasn't about, it wasn't about the kind of transformation that I often hear church people speak of. What I
Mm.
often experience, what I read Jesus is doing in the Gospels consistently is, I see you with all of your mess, and I'm choosing with my body and my spirit and who I'm connected to love you in this moment and beyond this moment. And I think that may be the only reason why I still hold on to my ordination, that my foot is still in the
Yeah.
church. Because if that wasn't something that I see clearly and hold very close to my heart, I would have no connection.
You sense it, you sense it there even underneath, around, yeah, outside of what's there. So I'm gonna read another piece that you kind of just spoke to. This is also Dale. Many people's lives revolve around analyzing, critiquing, and judging based on their accepted truths. I propose alternate ways of being that involve observing, introspecting, and consciously choosing engagement, fostering an embodied existence that resists or precedes control.
Mhm.
Preach. I guess that's
Yeah.
what the word is that goes along with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so some of this it feels like it's coming out of my own, like, Octavia Butler is coming up again, like this futuristic kind of, I guess I would say, dream of mine of the only way that our future would be different if we choose to relate to each other differently. And it's not going to come from voting the most liberal politician in our politics. It's going to come from how honest we are with ourselves and how we choose to relate to each other. And that's the ripple effect. And then I feel like I part of the issues that exist in our world today, I often at least read them as something that we inherited from a
Yes.
past, even like our nervous system, our minds. And I don't see any way to get out of those trappings unless we choose to relate to each other in ways that affirm the future that I think most of us, well, many of us say we want to have. But I think we are so tangled up in our fear and our desires for, materials, that it's really hard for us to see that, kindness and respect and honor, or sovereignty of another human being can mean something huge for our future. And I intend to do my best to practice that. How do I be present with this person in front of me, love them with all of my frailties and hiccups and struggles, because I truly desire a future for, even not for me, just like for my son to live in, that says that there's more space for him to breathe and exist on his own terms and create loving and beautiful relationships with people that are doing something similar.
We're thrilled to have BetterHelp as a sponsor for the Mankind podcast. BetterHelp matches you with a licensed therapist for live one-on-one sessions, someone trained to listen, support, and offer helpful insights. If getting one-on-one support feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to betterhelp.com/mankind and get 10% off your first month of therapy. Thank you. In working with couples and in working with men, where do you find, well, first of all, who comes to you? So I think that's a question. who shows up for you in these, who reaches out to you? And then where do you start in
Mm,
working with folks?
yeah. You mean the type of people that come to me?
Yeah, who shows up at your door?
Oh, yeah, yes. Initially, I was going into because I feel like I carry like my ancestors with me everywhere, so that's where I went initially.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
no, go there first. That's great. Go there.
Yeah, so and I talk about this, I speak about this often. I am Brenda Benson's grandson. I was her first grandchild, and she spoiled the shit out of me. And so part of the dynamic that was present in my family is when I would get in trouble with my mom, I had a very young mother, and if I got in trouble, I was probably gonna get a spanking. And my move would often be to call my grandmother. So anytime I wanted to feel safe, and I knew that whatever I brought, my grandmother would hold. That's I was going to her lap. So I'm always going to be Brenda Benson's baby. And so the person who always comes to me when I'm holding space with men is twofold. My grandmother and my grandfather. My grandmother for the comfort, my grandfather for the kind of the mindset about what does it look like? What does it look like to be a man? And the type of men that I have all different kinds of I have most of my clients are in their mid-20s, mid to late 20s. And I think what's beautiful about that age, at least this is true for me, I was still trying to trying to carve out, and I feel like this is continual because I'm still trying to figure out what it means for me to exist in this world. But they're looking for something, trying to figure out like where to like a stable place to put their feet. And part of their struggle with me is is I'm assisting them to find like the resources that help calm themselves, but I'm also telling them that there's no place to put your feet. That there's that we're actually constantly shifting and moving. So how do you create the resources to hold yourself as life is changing? And this definitely feels true for me. I mean, me and my son's mother divorced when he was 2. And like it felt like things were like constantly shifting all the time, and I couldn't find anywhere to put my feet. And then when I initially, and it feels like the moment that I found a place that I could put my feet, it's just like life is like, dude, what are you doing? Like I'm not giving you that opportunity. I'm trying to teach you to like move with life. And so I think that's why most of my clients are in between that age. And then my older clients that are around my age, I'll be 39 on the 29th. And I mean, they feel very similar to me, like things have happened in their lives and they're trying to, the language I often hear is trying to put their lives back together. And yeah, I think part of my language with them is allow it to fall apart. And then, yeah, you see what happens with that. Like the more you can be present with the fact that things have definitely fallen apart and you just allow yourself to grieve and honor the fact that you had those experiences. My experience is that something often grows out of that. And I think the more that we're able to be present with that and allow that to happen, oh my goodness, is beautiful. And I feel like I have to add painful. What comes out of that. And I think that's what life is. I don't actually like trying to tie things up in beautiful pictures. A lot of the ministers and even coaches that I work with love this language around hope. I don't, because I prefer to be with the fact that I actually don't know what the hell is getting ready to happen. And then when it happens, I love the shock of when something beautiful happens and I can just meet it in that moment.
It seems as if in the coaching world, I'm kind of referencing the like manosphere and manfluencer culture that's
Y-
out there right now is like the the bill of good. Yeah, and I so listeners, you might not be able to see this, but I just got a really great eye roll from Dale.
Yep.
He rolled his head back and really good eye roll. it seems like the bill of goods that they're trying to sell is stability, right? They're trying to
Mhm,
sell you if you get this and this and this and this car
mhm.
and this money and this
Yeah,
woman and this whatever, then
right.
you are going to be able to have a stable footing underneath you. But it seems like I feel like we're in a conversation about martial arts now, right?
Yeah.
That's not the point. The fluidity is the point.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, at least the way that I experience a lot of the conversations that are happening with, particularly for men, is like a reinstatement of the thing that already exists, like the traditional man box that already exists. It's like it's trying to find its footing again. And we use all this intellectual language and nice stuff to make women feel good and make men feel like this is the place you need to be, the club you need to be in. But as much as I adore the men that did influence me and the men that came before me, there's ways that I don't want to repeat what they practiced and even what they preached or even what they embodied. And so I'm constantly, the big picture for me is like dig deep and acknowledge actually what you really want out of this life. And so how do you kind of take that truth that it exists inside of you, not some model, and embody that thing that most speaks to your heart and your soul. And so I'm even really hesitant to give men advice because like that shit is about me. Like the advice that I give is about like how I'm moving through my own life. And I do appreciate being an example of the ways in which like cis hetero manhood is, and I'm gonna use this language just to poke at it, like can be queered. Like how can we love in very queer in queer ways that challenge that challenge the past, that challenge the normal definitions that we use, and still be able to claim manhood with your full body.
Yes.
I don't have to I don't have to be the man you want me to be for me to be able to claim manhood. I get to be the man that I am and claim manhood. And you can't take that away from me. That's what I often try to nudge my clients to. And it doesn't have to look anything like mine. Nothing like it. And I can love you and support you and walk with you as a man through this life. And we can also be walking very opposite paths. But the thing that I often tell my clients is that if you need me, I'll meet you back at this place here. But I might be going this way and you might be going this way. But I'll come back here if you need me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Shouts to, my goodness, Octavia Butler. Thank you, Octavia Butler. Shouts to
Yes.
Bell Hooks, who I think has been
Yes.
hanging out in this conversation with us. Shouts to Resma Menachem, my grandmother's
Mm,
hands, literally,
yes.
right?
Yes.
Like his book.
Mhm.
Wow, so much. So, and here's to the queering of masculinity. I'm with you on that.
Mhm.
Thank you. How should people find you, Reverend Dale?
Okay. So I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram often. Reverend Dale is my name on both. I also want to lift up that I'm a spiritual life coach, and so um, Facebook and Instagram are the best ways to contact me. My email is mysticdale1129 at Gmail. Yeah, and look out for completing a book called Liberating Relationships, which I am really excited to start promoting soon after I complete it.
Yes. So look for links in the show notes down below to how to find Reverend Dale. And is there any kind of shout that you want to do? I know that you are living in the tiny country of Lesotho, which is within the boundaries of the country of South Africa. In
Hmm.
South Africa, is there anything you want
Yeah.
to shout about your future in Lesotho on the
Oh
podcast?
man, thank you.
Are
Yeah.
you trying to
So
speak? I'm inviting you to speak reality into being here on the
yes,
podcast.
yes, thank you. So my deepest desire, and it's going to be completed, is to open a retreat center here in Lesotho called Peaceful Warrior Refuge. It's going to be primarily for men to come to I'm basically culminating all of my experience as a martial artist, as a contemplative, and creating room for men to come to develop, to begin their spiritual path, to continue their spiritual path, to fight, to gain resources, to take back home, to sustain themselves in their spiritual path. And that feels like a huge part of my calling. And so, yeah, Peaceful Warrior Refuge is on the way.
Thank you. And thank you for the correction and pronunciation, Lesotho.
Yeah.
I'm Boysen Hodgson. This has been Reverend Dale Benson. Dale, I look forward to speaking to you again, brother. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, man. I really, really appreciate it.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.